a trilogy that's underway that I will finish, I promise, called The Tunnel of Light, and it's more of a fantasy storyline, and so I've written Night Vision and The Dawning are both science fiction stories, and then I have a trilogy that's underway that I will finish, I promise, called The Tunnel of Light, and it's more of a fantasy storyline, and it takes place over about 1,500 years. Originally set in the 500 AD. It's based on the legend of Saint Ursula, which is she's a Catholic saint. She was sainted because she was, well, this is the Catholic version, she was traveling on a pilgrimage to Rome and was waylaid by some barbarian who wasn't Christian, and he said, "You must marry me," and she said no, and resisted him, and she and all of the virgins traveling with her were all slaughtered, and so she became a saint because she resisted this barbarian. "No, I'm a true Christian woman, I'm giving myself to Christ," and so she said no. Well, the deal with this legend is that Ursula traveled supposedly with 11,000 virgins in 11 boats.
Imagine that.
Imagine that, and they were all virgins. And so, and my take on this, on the legend, is that she traveled with, I only give her 11 virgins, but there was supposed to be 1,000 virgins and 1,000 virgins to a boat, which, you know, the major boats carried like 5 people. Close to 20 was about maximum in that era. And so in my version, you know, you've got Ursula. She's traveling with her 11 friends. They get to, and they all refuse to marry men and die for it. That to me is a lesbian story in that era. And so then I give them characters as they move through time. The bard on their journey turns out to be Hildegard von Bingen, who wrote the most amazing worship to Saint Ursula. And it's all very Christian and very Catholic, and Hildegard herself was made a saint. The context of this passionate, I mean, we're talking about language that is talking about dripping honeycombs, and the flush of flowers, and the richness of and voluptuousness of the experience of her religious passion for Saint Ursula. And I find lesbian subcontext in that too. So the bard among them in the next iteration turns out to be Hildegard von Bingen. She's trying to create music in order to rescue the people who were lost in the past, and so the story rolls forward. I am going to write the 3rd book. It's been too many years since the 2nd, but it's on my plan. I have the next romance I'm starting is called Warming Trend, and then it's hopefully going to fall in the gap between Warming Trend and whatever comes after that. And so after The Kisses That Counted, the next book is Warming Trend, and it's a romance. Again, a little different. I always tell myself, it's time for me to write a classic romance. You know, girl meets girl, they have some adventures, and then they get married. This is girl goes back to find out why girl gave her up and turned her in for something she didn't do academically. That she's an expert in glaciers and lives in Key West. So she left town basically after really some really wicked academic things happen. So there's a little bit about the academic backstabbing that can go on, and so she goes home to confront the demons and say, you know, I never did it. I didn't do it. Why did you agree with take such paltry evidence against me and join the court of public opinion? And so she's going to take on her past on that. So I got to find out how, you know, I got to do some research about glaciers now.
Yeah, you mentioned the L word. As a writer, how do you feel about the writing on the L word?
Everyone says I should give it another try. This was my experience of the very first episode. And I write character-driven stories, and I think that when you develop a character, the characters have to be true to the way you set them up. And so we're given these 2 women. One of them has quit her job and spent 6 months purifying herself to have a child. And they have done all the research. They have done everything they need to do to start a family. So far, so good. I'm with that. And then, at the end of the episode, they decide to have unprotected sex with a man who they know nothing about. They don't know whether he has any diseases, whether he's going to show up in season 3 to claim the baby. I don't know if that's happened or not, but I predicted that.
No.
It was a logical outcome of such a foolish thing for 2 women who were so set about having, and that just upset me. I was just like, is this going to be a soap opera where you set people up to be one thing, and they behave differently, and panic and angst ensues, and then, and that's how you turn the plot in a soap opera. You pull the rug out from under the character. So it never worked for me in that
There's
in that
no
format.
carpet in that building.
Oh, and Mercedes says there's no carpet in that building, because I just don't care for the soap opera format, and so it never really hooked me. Oh well.
How long do you spend researching?
It depends on the story. Carpool is set on an oil refinery, and one of the characters is an environmental biologist, but I had to do almost no research at the time because I was working on an oil refinery, typing documents for environmental biologists. So it was pretty easy to that part of it. So it's what, as far as something I know things about, I knew nothing about any of that, but it was an easy research. If it's an intense research, I can spend. It's hard because I research what I need to know with the scene I'm writing. I get to the point in the scene where I go, I don't know enough about this. And if I gloss it over, the reader's going to see it. Not only that, it's going to come back to bite me 2 chapters from now when I realize that I've got to refer to it and it better be accurate. Then I'll stop and I'll do a bunch of research. And I'll spend maybe, a week's worth of my writing time finding either at the library or online. Amazing amount of stuff is available online, but sometimes you run into these huge gaps, especially in academic stuff. Glaciers is a fascinating field when you start to look at it as to what they are and what they do. And the book's title is a double entendre. There's a warming trend in the world. And the glacier where there's certain evidence is melting. And so she's going to hope to dig up the evidence that will clear her because it's melting. But I need to look up things like rates of melt and where they're melting the fastest in different parts of Alaska so I can put the story in the right place. And so I think it's going to be outside of Fairbanks, which makes a lot of sense. There's a university in Fairbanks. But I'll also make up a place. If I don't have one where I need one, I'll just make it up. So it really depends. But this one, this is going to take me about a week, I think, and my research method is to just read everything I lay my hands on, let it soak in, and then it comes out in little ways in the characters, which is how people, when they know things, the cook never sits down and tells you the whole recipe at the outset. She just starts cooking and then mentions on the way, oh, by the way, we need some butter. And it's, it's more natural if I do it that way. So,
Have any of your readers, not knowing the research and background that you did on Finders Keepers, especially from a personal perspective, written you and taken exception or say that you got,
No, I haven't had anybody complain about anything in Finders Keepers.
Yeah.
Actually, surprisingly, I've heard from 4 or 5 straight women who said that it was recommended to them by a friend because they were also overweight and struggling with their weight. And they said, no, read this. Forget the lesbian part. You'll like the lesbian part. It's a good love story. But read the part where the woman is doing all the research about her weight loss and trying to get into why she should lose weight and be healthy and not just to be thin, which is the bad way to go about it. So, yeah, I did a lot of research, but most of it was personal. I already knew a whole bunch about it, and there was something new that just came out. Never mind. I'll talk forever about it if I start. Anybody else?
It's interesting to hear you talk about certain stories that seem to have sprung from your life experience, others from a poem. How is it that you develop these ideas? Do they just come to you?
They sort of come to me in a lot of different ways. Sometimes it'll be the title. I just love a title. And Painted Moon is the name of a rose in Bouchard Garden. That I saw the rose, and the roses were in bloom when we were there, and it was a white rose that was edged with blue. It was absolutely spectacular. And I thought a moon, and the name of the rose was Painted Moon. It was I didn't know anything about the book for 6 months, but I liked the title. Other times it'll be a theme where I think, well, that's really interesting. Like Substitute for Love, back in 1990, it would have been the early 1999 or so.